The Square Ball Podcast.
Hello, welcome to the weekly show. It's brought to you by Levi Solicitors, levisolicitors.co.uk/the Square Ball to get your 10% discount on your legal fees. Dan, Michael and Rob with you today on episode 254. The first part of this is where we rattle through the latest Leeds United news, and we're going to start with a quick plug around the Gary Speed anniversary. Obviously, we lost Gary Speed 10 years ago at the age of just 42. A lot of feelings have been stirred up over the past week. Before we sort of deal with that side of things, we've got an event at the Holbeck this Sunday night. Obviously, we're playing Brentford on the telly at 2 o'clock. We'll preview that in part two. After that, we've got an event to raise money for mental health charities. We've got Hayden Evans down there. So if you saw the Phil Hayes show the other week when we spoke to Gary's former agent and one of his best mates up until his death, it was really good one. It was really informative. Always good to hear from Hayden, just to humanise a footballer, because often we don't, do we? So it was really good to hear from Hayden. He's going to be there with Popey, Adam Pope, on Sunday, 8 o'clock, the Holbeck. If you want to go to that, go to slunglow.org and then go to the What's On bit and you can get tickets for that. It's only a £5. Money's going to charity and it'll be really, really good. So if you're knocking about in Leeds on Sunday, go to that. So yeah, 10 years has passed.
We have just had Simon Grayson confirmed for that.
Is that correct? Oh, exclusive.
So there's now a bonus person there. So I suppose he's been wrongly fired, hasn't he, Grayson? Once again, he's left his job there. So yeah, but he's going to be there. Obviously, he'll have played with Gary as well, won't he? And he's
signed on the same day, didn't he? I think.
Yes, in his younger days. So yeah, it should be really good. It's Slung Low do everything, pay as you feel basically. So I think it's a £5, but it's all for charity. So put more in.
We'll be down there. Yeah, we'll be down there. We'd love to see you down there. I think Michael's going to be drinking, so he can come and tell you how we're going to get relegated.
I've booked a travel lodge in Leeds, so I'm in business.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point at which you were debating whether to go cheaper than that. What's the travel lodge cost you?
It was £33.
Right. Bit extravagant, is that, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a bit. That's the cheaper of the two travel lodges.
Okay.
I didn't want to go for the premium one, did I? Down by BB's.
Is it the Discovery Inn that's by the
stayed there before
Scarlet
as well.
Taps? I've stayed there before. That is bleak.
That is that is an odd place.
If you're an out of town fan who hasn't got somewhere to stay and has ended up in the Discovery Inn just by the station, it's describe it in a word.
It's bizarre. I remember there's loads of different stairs and lifts, and you have to walk you get in one lift, then you have to walk along and go up another lift.
It's like several buildings all stapled together, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very odd. But
anyway, back to the thing about Gary Speed as well. And we've been saying on the podcasts and shows around this that if there's one good thing to have come out of what happened with Gary Speed, it's that it's just opened up that conversation now, and it feels like we're so much further forward 10 years on than we were when Gary Speed died. I mean, it was a massive wake-up call for me, personally. I can remember just being so shocked waking up on that. It was a Sunday morning, wasn't it? Because he'd done Match of the Day or the Football Focus the day before. And we saw that really poignant video from Dan Walker, wasn't it, who posted footage of that day, and that got me as well on the day of the anniversary.
I think it's one of those things with things like this, people often don't maybe give it sufficient consideration until something directly affects them. And even though, everyone affected by Gary Speed, very few of those people actually knew him personally. I think we all kind of felt like we did, and so everyone had a bit of almost a bit of a stake in this as a thing, and it maybe changed people's perceptions of it from being something that happened to other people and that something that happened to people who were, it's kind of unhappy with life or whatever. All of a sudden you were like, but that's Gary Speed. Gary Speed's great.
Well, when you are in the public eye, you become public property to a certain extent, don't you? Whether you want to be or not. And I think that's probably the case with Gary, because he was manager of Wales and he was on Football Focus, and then suddenly he's gone. I hadn't realised that he was 42, and I mentioned that before. You see patterns in these things, and I've sort of mentioned in passing. I've always. I struggled when I was 42. So last year, it was around when we got promoted in the summer of 2020. I was at my worst when I was 42, and I hadn't realised this until the anniversary came up this time around. And I saw that he was 42 years old, and I don't know why it just chimed with me, because your brain recognises patterns or sees coincidences, doesn't it? And I was not in a good place that summer, and actually Leeds getting promoted was part of the thing that lifted me out of it. It's don't know. It just resonates really closely because suicide's just a huge killer of men under 45. It's the biggest in the country, isn't it? So if it's opened up the conversation, and I don't mind talking about it on here. I mean, I never got anywhere near thinking about suicide, but having dealt with depression and anxiety then, it's quite close to home, just knowing that he was suffering and he couldn't talk about it and he couldn't externalise it, and we saw what happened, and it was just the worst outcome imaginable.
I remember being down at the ground shortly after it had happened, sort of kind of people leaving flowers and stuff. I actually found a copy of Square Ball with him on the front, and I took it down, and there was people like press there and media and stuff trying to kind of get little chats with fans. And even in saying I don't want to do it, I nearly cried to the person who was there. They were like, "Do you want to say a few words?" And I was like, "No, I can, thank you." Yeah. And it was, I think that's how people were about it at the time and still are about it now. Like 10 years on, you would think it had might have gone away a little bit, but it's one of those things that I think still really affects people. And obviously we had Hayden in, who was one of his good mates, but you could tell, reflecting on the whole situation and on memories of Gary, it was all just so difficult for everyone still. But it's yeah, like you say, I think some good has come out of it in the way that people now talk about stuff.
You saw that in the interview in The Athletic that Alan Shearer did with lots of his former teammates who'd played with Gary Speed at different clubs or countries, and just how they were kind of able now to open themselves up and be vulnerable, I guess, is a kind of a sign that they could talk about that now, which I guess in the past, and they are all that age range which you were talking about, which stereotypically struggle with that kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just the coincidence really bit with me. I don't know why. But as we say, the conversation has opened up. I found the reason why I don't mind talking about it is because it helped me deal with it at the time. Because I told Phil and stuff when I was, going through this stuff. Like I ended up referring myself to therapy because I thought I cannot carry on feeling like I'm feeling right now. This just something isn't right, and I felt like I was going to feel that way forever because I thought this is not who I used to be. So I ended up referring myself for help, thankfully, and it worked quite quickly for me because I was a fairly mild to medium case as it was diagnosed. So yeah, keep talking and keep drawing attention to it. And if things aren't right, just talk to your mates and reach out to your mates and speak to them. That text where you just send a text to a mate, "You all right?" It counts for so much, doesn't it? You don't always realise.
I am now in a WhatsApp group with like my mates I kind of went to football with, and while it is mainly like people being absolutely awful in there and slagging off Tyler Roberts, the question is regularly asked, like, "Everyone all right?"
Yeah.
And people do talk fairly openly in there about stuff, and I don't think that would have happened without Gary Speed necessarily. So trying to find progress in something bad, I think is what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and it's brought up things like Andy's Man Club, which is one of the charities that we're supporting, because you may have seen the announcement. If you haven't, we've got the video on YouTube. It's referred to on the website. We've got a short podcast episode that me and Michael just knocked together a few days ago, little 8-minute explainer of the charity walk that we're doing in May. So it's the back end of May. Go back and listen to that 92-mile walk.
But don't sign up for it.
You don't want people to sign up in anymore.
No.
How many people have signed up?
We've got the spreadsheet here.
And we're showing an interest, not signed up.
Well, these people who are saying they want to do it, how many were you anticipating when we did this?
Well, if
it's 92 miles, it's a long way.
Yeah, so you're walking from North Wales. It involves several overnight stays. North Wales, Gary's first football pitch back to Ellen Road via the mural.
226 people have signed up. We can't. 226 people can't do it. Is the bad thing about this now? Because great that everyone wants to do it though, but we'll have to find some way of doing this because I don't know what it is at the moment. I kind of thought we'd have a problem in that maybe like 60 people might want to do it, and that would be, logistically a bit difficult. 225 plus. Is becoming a bit of a problem. So we'll get back to you on that. If you've signed up, thank you for expressing an interest. But shit.
Do you know what it is? It's a great demonstration of the power of the messages, not our message, but just this notion that Gary Speed was such a high-profile figure who took his own life, and we need to keep talking more, raising money for good causes. The amount of interest is huge. It's brilliant.
It's one of those things that we could, if we'd have done a different 92-mile walk for a different charities, I think we would have been in more of the ballpark of 30, 40 people signing up. We've gone, this is for Gary Speed, and everyone's gone, yeah, I'll do that.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Yeah.
I've never walked more than a mile before. Never mind. I'll have a go at this because it's for Gary Speed. So it's brilliant. But
it's also a problem.
It's also a problem.
So yeah, we are raising money for it's Andy's Man Club and the Samaritans. We're going to split the money between mental health charities, and it's going to be a good laugh. Rob, are you coming along?
I believe I've been signed up, which I didn't know about, but maybe, yeah.
Yeah, we should have, hopefully, but we are going to, at this point, as we mentioned on the other podcast, we're going to be working on stuff like funding, sponsorship, transport. It's all going to get sorted now. Now we know that we've got a huge amount of interest. It'll be probably coaches rather than minibus, won't it? But we're going to document the whole thing as well. So it's after the end of the season. We'll take recording equipment with us, phones, all that sort of stuff, and we'll get video, we'll get audio, we'll turn it into a show so you can kind of join us along the journey and see how much we suffer and see how much of a mistake we make going into the final day. As I was saying on that show, my birthday is the final day, so let's hope that we don't get shit-faced going into the final day, which is a 20-mile walk from Huddersfield to Leeds or something stupid.
That's a small bit, that.
Yeah.
That's the easy part.
But thank you if you have expressed an interest. We will get back to you. Is about the size of it.
And in the meantime, come along to this event. It's slunglow.org/shows. Is it /shows? Yeah, that'll take you to the page where you can book tickets, and cheap beer there as well, which I know. Always worth
That's why you're going, isn't it?
Always worth considering.
Yeah, so Hayden Evans, Adam Pope, and now Simon Grayson confirmed as coming along. So please do come along and show your support for that after the Brentford game if you're knocking round in Leeds and Holbeck. And there should be a few people around because we're playing Brentford on Sunday. Be interesting to see what Angus Kinnear says in his programme notes for Brentford, which I presume are being penned at the moment. There's been a bit of a hoo-ha about the stuff that he said in the programme for Palace. Quite a lot of criticism of the fan-led review of football governance. What do you make of this? Because there are bits of this where I read, and I should say, like at the start of this, I like Angus Kinnear. I found him really engaging when he's coming here and spoken to us. And we've talked before on the show about the pint test. I can have a pint with Angus, no problem. Some of this I don't agree with. Some of it I do, and I have sympathy for it. But I don't know. I don't know. Some of it feels misplaced. Do you think?
There's a lot of self-interest in it, I think, is the thing that you need to look at. These criticisms are not necessarily unfair in all cases. The stuff he's saying about how independent regulators are not always great, that is true. But then equally, industries do tend to always want to regulate themselves because they know that's how they can get away with more stuff.
Yes.
Like if you ask any banker, do you think banking needs more regulation? They'll say absolutely not. If you ask a gambling company if they think that gambling needs more regulation,
we'll regulate it ourselves.
Exactly. Cigarette people would be like, no, it's fine. Stop getting involved. We'll tell people it might be bad for them. It'll be fine. So that bit of it.
The problem for me, I mean, I get the because he mentions the government, and we don't need to get into politics, but I don't have a great deal of faith in the present government to organise oversight of football. Or oversight of much, to be perfectly honest. But I think the message is fairly clear. This is a fan-led review, and fans don't trust football to regulate itself. That's what I took from the report, which I've read all of it, and I broadly agree with pretty much all of it. And it's fan-led. It was done with consultation with fans. So fans don't trust football enough to look after itself.
I think, he doesn't quite know his audience here, does he? I don't quite know who these notes were intended for, really, because they're in the programme which you sell to fans, and they've put them on the website, which is unusual for the fans to read, and you're taking aim at a fan-led review, which maybe isn't the wisest idea. I don't know. It seems strange to me, and it's weird because I think Leeds are quite good at staying quiet a lot of the time, and I know some people get frustrated with that. I don't mind it, to be honest, but then when they do seem to try and grab the narrative a little bit, it seems to go awry, and we end up in Myanmar or Radrazani calling for a breakaway from the football league.
Let's address that, because I've pulled the quotes from interviews he did around. So it's 3 years ago now, so back end of 2018, when we were in the Championship, and he said, we need to consider another way to create a Premier League 2 that can be sustainable, even for the teams who are not promoted. The time is getting ready to consider what to do so we don't have a crisis every 2 years when a club go bankrupt. All the clubs should open a discussion to see how we can change this league so it's sustainable. So there's an acknowledgement there. It's not sustainable. as Steve Nicol would say. All right, that runs completely counter to what Angus Kinnear has said in his programme notes, that football is actually dead sustainable in this country. What has changed in the 3 years since we saw that interview? The only thing that's changed is we're in the Premier League, and now we've got a much larger slice of the pie. But we were in the Football League calling for a bigger slice of the pie there. We wanted a redistribution of wealth 3 years ago because we didn't feel we were getting enough, and now we're getting more than enough. We don't want to redistribute the wealth.
Mm.
It's self-interest, unfortunately, and I think the club comes out of this looking hypocritical, and I do have sympathy for the position because, do we want too much interference in football? I'm quite pleased that Derby's chickens are all coming home to roost right now, because it feels like they were financially doping their way to the playoff final, and we abided by the profit and sustainability rules when we were in the Football League, so credit to the club for that. On this, though, I think they've got it wrong, and the Radrazani thing closes out by saying it's not for me. Hopefully I think he's saying it's not for me to regulate. Hopefully I'm going to the Premier League very soon, which we were, but it's for the sport and the fans and the clubs. So Andrea Radrazani has said it's for the sport and the fans and the clubs. So the fans have had their say and said, we don't trust you to run football. And this is not you as in the people at our club. I think they're pretty decent. But football as a whole. And yet, since we've got in the Premier League, we're now being told the opposite message.
I think as well, it's trying to make an argument essentially that the regulations that have been in the past haven't worked, because as Leeds fans we've seen this. The owners and directors test, fit and proper person, whatever it's been called over the years, has given us Bates and GFH and Chelino that we've had to suffer through. But I don't feel like the correct argument is therefore to say, well, don't have any more regulation then. The argument is to say, well, just do better regulation if that is the problem. And just saying, Kinnear makes the point that, well, all these clubs have survived. It's like, well, yeah, that is true. And they do survive, but ultimately clubs survive. They go through, as Derby will probably find out, clubs go through a spend and then bust cycle, and then at the bust cycle is when fans pay all of their money to get them going again. It's not that they're only sustainable because people are unwilling to let them die. It's not because they're sustainable as businesses, because they're not. They're sustainable on the face of it, that people will always just continue to support them. They have the knowledge that you can be as bad as you want as a team, and a certain number of people will continue to give you money, and that isn't a business.
I think to give it a bit of context, I think football is moving towards, and in the Football League in particular, is finally moving towards self-regulation, because they tightened up all the financial regulations around fair play, profit, and sustainability. Like I said, they're finally getting some teeth with clubs like Derby. So I think we are getting closer to a situation where they're less risk averse, and the regulations are actually starting to count now for clubs. But is it enough? And is there enough in there that's going to fix the problem as a whole? Because is there a problem with football? There is
a problem, and it's the way I see it. Admittedly, the way I would like to restructure football would involve completely tearing up the existing structures and stuff, and obviously the club would be completely against that, because it would mean that all the money we have earned by being promoted now would be kind of gone. But like I would rather have it so that the Premier League isn't so cut off, and it isn't a case that relegation is less about a sporting sanction and more about, oh, we've lost all our money now and we need to try and get back in there as soon as possible. I feel like in the old days, getting relegated was bad because you had to play worse teams and you got to go down. You had to drop down a league and you had to try and get your way back out of it. But the money wasn't so ridiculous that it was a case of, well, we're knackered now. Whereas it feels like now the money is everything. It's more than the sport is.
Well, I mean, this is the thing as well. The thing that's at the root of this is the gap between the Football League and the Premier League, which is exactly what Radrazani was speaking about 3 years ago. That's the truth of the matter, isn't it? That huge disparity, and doing something to make football make that less of a problem, because you're asking for. I mean, look at what Newcastle. So if Newcastle go down this season, they're going to face huge financial challenges next season, because they'll have a massive wage bill, they'll have parachute payments, but even still, they've still got to comply with all the profit and sustainability losses.
Well, they have, but what they'll actually do
buy their way straight out.
is assume they're going to get out straight away, make sure they do, and then it's not a problem.
Well, so that brings us back then to the parachute payments. So let's imagine a world in which Leeds United do go down this season. I think Leeds United would take the parachute payments, don't you? Rather than reject them, because he's talking about clubs, is Kinnear talking about clubs being self-sustaining. Well, that's not self-sustaining, isn't it? Is it? It's taking the parachute from the Premier League in order to survive. So the existence of parachute payments, they argue, is what shows there is a problem with football finance, because they want to do away with them. I don't think for one second that Leeds United would turn them down. So,
and I'm pretty sure in the Championship, weren't we arguing that owners should be allowed to put more money in?
Well, that's the point I was making about the profit and sustainability stuff,
which makes them more likely to be unsustainable. Essentially, in the short, as soon as that money is withdrawn, it makes them instantly unsustainable, isn't it? So it's, I would, as I said, my ideal version is completely tearing up ownership structures and league structures, which is clearly not going to happen. So, it feels like any kind of review would be playing around the edges of things anyway, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, let's face it, it's not going to go anywhere, is it, anyway?
No.
These things never do. You get recommendations, everyone pats each other on the back, and then everything carries on broadly as it was before, or you get watered-down versions of it. So,
and as Kinnear was pointing out, these are privately run companies in a privately run organisation.
Which is what I do have sympathy for. Like I say, Derby have been badly run. We had our turn of being badly run, and we paid the price for it. They're paying the price for it. So it is self-regulating to an extent, but the slight difference is that, clubs are community assets, and as you say, Michael, it's always the fans who ultimately end up stepping in and bailing the clubs out of the shit. Like Bury and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the people who cause the issues are never the ones who actually pick up the problem at the end of the day, are they? It's people who still want somewhere to go and watch football on a Saturday who go, well, in that case, I suppose we'll have to start another club, and we'll start again in the Conference North or whatever. And it's for those people that it is bad, and that they would, like, if you're a Bury fan, you would be able to say, well, clearly something has gone wrong here. I guess the point Kinnear is making is, well, this wouldn't make any difference anyway to those teams. But then maybe if ownership was structured properly, it would. With
a bit of oversight, and then you force them, because the point he makes is about, they'd have blown all their money on Pavel Chabitsky anyway, which that to me is an admission of part of the problem then. Is that, okay, you might send some more money down the pyramid, but also enforce tighter financial controls than we have at the minute.
It's notable he didn't use John Kevin Augustin as well as the example for that punchline. Exactly.
Well, I never heard of him. Eddie Nketiah is where it's at. Would you take Eddie Nketiah because he's turned down an Arsenal contract? Looks like he's going to be leaving in the summer. Or have we moved past that? Has that ship sailed now? Would you have him back?
I suspect it hasn't sailed enough for lots of clickbait websites to start linking us with him constantly for the next 6 months. I wouldn't particularly be in a rush to re-sign him, would you?
Probably not.
Did he fit?
I think we'd still have to pay some money for him as well, wouldn't we?
Because he's under 24.
Yeah, so I think we'd end up still forking out for him.
Joffy's the future, isn't he? Eddie's old news.
I think so. I mean, he went back to Arsenal, didn't he? Because he wasn't getting any game time with us, and has not played since then. He's a no scored goals in the League Cup, but
that was quite a big mistake, wasn't it? Really.
From us or from them?
Just it didn't benefit us, obviously, because we ended up with Augustin, and he didn't get the game time, and he's just kind of fizzled out at Arsenal. Whereas you think maybe you stick it out for another 6 months or whatever at Leeds, and at least lay a marker down and show that when you're playing regularly, you can score regularly, because he was putting a few goals in.
Well, that's the weird thing about these loan moves, where clubs want guaranteed minutes, because they're sending young players out to learn how to be proper footballers, but part of being a proper footballer is being out of the team and trying to get back into the team. Whereas he comes to Leeds, he probably maybe could have had more opportunities. He was a twisted bollock away from getting a run of games, but it didn't happen. So then, rather than see whether he can fight it out and be a proper footballer, they just call him back, and he's sat in their reserves for 2 years or whatever.
Ah, well.
And he was in the brief time, he scored some important goals for us. He scored with Brentford coming up. He scored the winner in that, didn't he? Which was, when you look at how the season ended, that 3-point swing over Brentford was probably key at, in the run-in. And then he came off the bench at Barnsley, didn't he? And scored an important goal there. So I don't know. It was good for us, but whether or not that, he's going to be 23 at the end of this season.
Too old.
Well, he's not.
Can't go in the under-23s, can he then?
He's not.
If he's
not,
23.
That's not a young player anymore.
No,
though.
it's not, is it?
23. You need to. I'm glad that he's leaving though, because Arsenal would probably just keep hold of him otherwise, and then he'd be there. He'd still be having the same problem at 26. He'd be like, "Oh, still not got any games."
Speaking of the 23s, they played away at Man City, and we got Pat Bamford back. Played the full 90 when he wasn't necessarily supposed to, but injuries forced their hand there, didn't they? And Luke Ayling. So good to see those like back into the fold now. And we were winning, and we lost.
He looked really good, did Bamford?
Yeah,
I thought he looked very much like Pat Bamford of old. There was not. I didn't particularly think he was rusty. Admittedly, he's playing against, a under 23s reserve team, but they're very good under 23s in Man City. It's worth saying. They've had essentially a decade of unlimited money to invest in youth development, and you can see it's kind of worked for them.
And that Man City winner, I haven't seen this, but Klaassen made a mistake, didn't he?
It wasn't great, was it? The ball. He actually played all right. He made a few decent saves, which how he has been playing recently was an improvement. But then, right towards the end, it looked like he'd gathered. I don't know if it was a shot or a pass. Now I can't quite remember. And then suddenly the ball had squirmed free, and they'd scored in the last minute. And as much as we're talking about January targets or a midfielder or a striker or things like that, maybe a grown-up goalkeeper.
Bring in a 36-year-old journeyman goalkeeper.
He does worry me every time I've seen him, I have to say. I know there's the caveat of it being under 23s and it doesn't matter and he's learning and stuff, but then when you do think he's like a broken finger away from being in our first team for several weeks,
and there's a lot at stake,
it's kind of worrying,
because we don't want those parachute payments, do we, baby? No. Right, on to something about us, so forgive us for this indulgence. We were nominated for the FSA Awards again, weren't we? Which is like the 10th or 12th year on the bounce. Did we win? We didn't win. But thank you if you did nominate us. We didn't expect to win this one, did we? We were in the fanzine category this year. We won the podcast one last year, which we weren't in this year, and we didn't attend. But Rhys Lowry, who's one of our illustrators, he attended on our behalf, didn't he? And he seemed to have a jolly nice time. He did, with the freebies on the table. And
Graham Smith of the YEP was down. They also didn't win. I mean, admittedly, they were up against like the Guardian in their category, which is kind of tough competition.
I mean, it's a Guardian award, is that one? They've won it every year.
Yeah, I think they have won it for like 8 years in a row now, Newspaper of the Year or something. So, but yeah, it's nice to be nominated and all that. And I love Supreme, the Sunderland fanzine, which it is good. I remember in the very early days.
I was going to say we had a good look at that, didn't we?
Yeah, in the very early days, I think it was like after we'd made one issue of Square Ball, having taken it on, and I was shopping around for other fanzines to kind of see what they were doing.
This was in the 2009 era where I think I was doing the design for it at that point, and I didn't know. I self-taught based on YouTube tutorials, as you can do with anything in life, really. Yeah,
so it was a basic-looking thing, wasn't it, to begin with? A far cry from the sort of magazine now, but we did get a copy of that and go, oh, okay, you could do this sort of stuff. That's interesting. So
inspiration, not stealing, inspiration.
Yeah, we I suppose it changed our opinion slightly of what fanzines could look like, because Square Ball had been very basic before, and then this looked a bit more like a normal magazine, and I think from issue 2 or 3 then it kind of went a bit more that way, and then some professional people got involved and made it look a lot better.
But as Billy Bremner said, you get no for coming second, so we got no. YP didn't get out, well, they got a free piss up, so that's fine, isn't it? Sort of price you like, Michael.
Exactly, but yeah, next year. There's always next year.
Yeah, and congratulations to A Love Supreme. That's the point there as well. Very worthy winners. So fingers crossed for next year.
They need something, don't they? Sunderland at the minute. They're even more mired in League One than we were. So I think they've done their time now. I'd let them out, to be honest. Little Lee, let him free.
That wraps up part 1 of the weekly show. Hang on then, have a look in the same playlist, episode 254. We've got the Brentford preview coming up, plus heroes and villains.
The Square Ball Podcast.